Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Was Turned Into a Monstrous Weapon. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Needles. He hated the needles. His first memories were of the needles, and the last bastion of sanity inside him wondered if they would be his last. They were always taking his BLD. On the rare occasion that they didn't, they forcibly injected him with drugs and fluids instead. He no longer remembered anything else. Always the poking and the prodding, the cutting, the slicing. Experiment after endless experiment. Innumerable tests. Break this, destroy that, kill them or kidnap that one, followed by more needles. Rinse and repeat. A hell without end, without relent, without respite, without escape. It was always worse when he tried to escape. The boy didn't know the name of his captors. Frankly, he no longer cared. Rather, he'd been stripped of the capacity to care. But through the pain, through the experiments, he clung to one emotion. One that outlasted all others, through the pain, through the sorrow, the despair, and the fear. Even as they shattered his mind and began to whittle away at his very self, he held this feeling firmly in his grasp. It was all he knew, a promise of pain, of anger, of vengeance against them. Hate. Hate towards himself. Hate at those who did this to him. Hate for the world that had allowed this. Hate that he couldn't no longer remember his own name. The boy was nearly feral when she found him. In hindsight, one could call it a miracle or perhaps a curse. That Tabane Shinanono discovered him to begin with. After all, she certainly hadn't been looking for him in the ruins of that base. Phantom Task was well known for their misdeeds, but they sometimes left something useful behind when one of their bases was discovered and they were forced to retreat. Not always, but often enough to make the occasional adventure worthwhile. It could even be said that the genius was counting on that very eventuality. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bothered coming to Germany in the first place. Finders keepers, as the Americans were so fond of saying. She'd been hoping to lay claim to some materials for Anubis, as it were, even if she didn't necessarily expect to find them here. One might think her delusion for venturing out into hostile territory so carelessly. Her presence in this ruined shell of a bunker was more on a lark than anything else. She hadn't come to save anyone. Indeed, she'd purposely timed her arrival well ahead of the authorities, and hadn't expected to find any survivors at all, let alone a boy. It was blind bloody luck that she stumbled upon him in the first place, and luck again that she didn't perish outright in doing so. Geez, she murmured, tracing her hand along a scorched wall. This place is a mess. Did they burn everything? Spoil sports. CLCK. Imagine her surprise then, when a portion of that very wall folded back at her touch. As she looked on, it receded with a metallic clank. A manic smile greeted the sight. Oh ho, she cooed, rubbing her hands together. I found a secret. Without so much as a second thought for her own safety or otherwise, the creator of the is advanced, humming a nameless tune beneath her breath. Heedless of the rubble crunching beneath her boots, the genius all but charged in. And why should she be? She'd never once faced something that could threaten her life in, her life. Perhaps that was arrogant of her to believe. She wasn't armed or armored. Should she come under attack, she had only her hands and feet to defend herself. Nevertheless, despite that, or perhaps in spite of it, she waded into the dark room. The light snapped on and her soul warning came in the form of a snarl. Then something came at her. Oops, her own body may have been modified and overpowered at the cellular level, but even then she evaded by a narrow margin. A rush of red filled her vision and by sheer instinct she jumped, tucking both legs into her scent, dress fluttering with the forcefulness of her leap. Just as well. Her attacker shot past like an arrow loosed from a bow, clawed hand biting deep into the stone in place of the space she'd just vacated. The slightest trickle of pain flared across her face, and she realized with some amusement that they'd managed to scratch her right cheek. Whoa, now, she laughed, backpedaling. You're a speedy one. Whatcha doing here? Her attacker's only response was a hiss. A creature of anger and instinct, a beast apart from the rest. Wild crimson eyes glared out at her beneath a frazzled mop of blonde hair, his whiskered cheeks lending him an almost bestial appearance. Clad in little more than dirty, tattered rags, he crouched on all fours like some sort of fell beast, shrouded in an eerie crimson relief. No, that wasn't quite right. If she had to give it a name, she'd call it an aura, a veritable pall of scarlet energy deity across his body in the semblance of a beast. A lone tail of ruby malice thrashed behind him, boiling as though superheated from within by pure hatred. Grog. A wordless snarl fled from his lips when she tried to approach him. His feral behavior didn't deter Tabane in the slightest. On the contrary, it made her all the more eager to get near him. Who was he? What was he? When had he gotten behind that wall? Where was what red aura coming from? Why was he so painfully thin? How had he managed to get the drop on her? Too many questions. Not enough answers. Nowhere near enough. This was the kind of mystery she lived for. She wanted to dive in, wrap her hands around its knot, and pull it apart. Because it made her curious. She wanted to know. No, needed to. Say, boy, she sang, crooking her hand towards him. You want to come with me? I promise you won't regret it. I'll even let you call me Mama. For a moment, she swore the feral boy actually deadpanned. Wordless gibberish followed, and he lunged. Tabane was waiting for just that. Laughing, she danced to the side and out of the way, bowing backwards as 5 clawed fingers roared past her face. Her hand knifed into the side of his neck before he could retaliate, taut digits crushing against a pressure point. The boy gurgled in wordless surprise and swept past her, his own momentum dragging him across the base in a tangle of arms and legs. Tabane watched his helpless flight with a giggle, one hand rising to shade her laughter as he slammed headlong into a wall with devastating crunch. Ouch, that looked painful. Had he broken his neck? Was he dead? No, absolutely not. Not allowed. That would have been an inordinately boring ending after risking her life. Whatever that strange red energy was, it fascinated Tabane. No, that word was enough. It enthralled her. Could it be used as a shield, an energy source, a means of flight, or better yet, could it power in his core of its own accord? Oh, the possibilities were endless. Her mind was already teeming with ideas, but each of those ideas hinged on the boy being alive. Chifuyu would have her head for this. She knew it. Yet here, in this instant, this sliver of time, she simply couldn't bring herself to care what her old friend thought. Her thoughts were decidedly elsewhere. She knew she'd gotten lucky. For whatever reason, the boy's captors hadn't fed him in ages, allowing her to take advantage of his weakened state. In his prime, he could have overwhelmed her with ease. Yes, had the tables turned, had she been off by even a hair, this boy would have ripped her apart without hesitation. This was, by all accounts, someone she should kill, not spare. Somehow that made it all more exciting. Approaching the boy's prone form, she tentatively nudged him with her toe. Hello, anyone home? Please don't disembowel me, Blondie. An irritated, but thankfully weak, growl was his response. A mad smile blossomed across her fine features. Slowly, carefully, she mussed his matted hair. I think I'm going to keep you. Warm. My mother was warm. Warm, and 7 shades of crazy. I can't think of a better way to describe her. Like a gentle blanket deedy over sunshine dappled with honey and a hint of madness. She was wild, eccentric, yet also kind. Thanks to that small kindness, my once tiny world expanded, broadened to new horizons I'd never known before. Through her I learned more than mere words and technology, rather, what it meant to see the world from a different perspective. To know, to feel, not only the art of understandings, but what it meant to empathize with them. New realms opened to me. Germany, England, Japan, China. So often my mother laughed at reality, and eventually I learned to do the same. Time flowed like wind. Through her, I made new friends. Thanks to her, I soon came to meet them. A wild sister with startling eyes the color of BLD. A quiet girl whose sole joy came in the form of her cooking. A childhood friend who seemed determined to cut me into pieces. A lost lass that reveled in combat, yet concealed a startling frailness of self. Through each of them, I slowly began understood what it meant to be human. In time, I understood that I was not of this world, that I hailed from another. Stolen from by hands unknown. Snatches of memory eventually returned during the time I spent in Germany, and with them, my name. Naruto, like Aunt Chifuyu, I found himself different, isolated from the world by the unique circumstances of his past. She always seemed sad somehow, as if she'd lost someone precious. There was a sorrow to those crimson eyes of hers, a pain that would never truly heal. Fade over time perhaps, but still, it would always be there. Like an old wound, she'd carry that silent scar for the rest of her life, perhaps even to her grave. Her quiet sorrow only seemed to deepen over the years. That didn't sit right with me. After all, I was broken, too. Perhaps it was because I had been broken, maybe that's why I became so keen on helping others. I didn't understand how special this unique ideal must have made me seem to them. Until a most unusual destiny quite suddenly moved itself upon me. What was Mother thinking, sending me there of all places? Wake up, brother. Moi. Just 5 more minutes. No, a soft voice chided him, lingering in his ears. You said that 5 minutes ago. Get up. Now. But I don't wanna. Poke. Warped azure eyes creaked open with a ponderous groan, only to slam shut as the unwelcome light of day greeted them. Groaning, he swatted at the small hand poking his whiskered cheek, to no avail. His tormentor only perpetuated their efforts, relentlessly prodding at his face until they finally achieved a reaction. No matter how he tossed and turned, the prodding continued with the single-minded determination that only a cherished sibling could possess, stubbornly denying him the sweet release of slumber he sought. If anything, it only grew worse the more until finally he could take it no more. I see. So that's how it is, little sister. If you're going to interrupt my nap. Startlingly sharp teeth flashed in the daylight, gleaming with menace. Prepare yourself for the consequences. Grinning, he bit down. Chump. Strong. Oh, an outraged yelp greeted him at once and the questing finger withdrew. UBSTRD. Even half asleep, Naruto still had the wherewithal to smile. That's what you get for waking me up, Madoka. So that's the thanks I get. Teary red orbs regarded him, narrow and angry when he finally opened his eyes. Framed by a short CRP of messy dark hair, her pale face rather resembled that of a younger Chifuyu, or it would have, if she weren't wearing such a murderous scowl. Perhaps he shouldn't have bit her hand. As things stood, his foster sibling looked all of an instant from leaping across her desk to strangle him in his seat. She'd do it, too. He had no doubt about that. He might be many times stronger than her, but she'd proven herself to be devilishly fast in the past. Thankfully something seemed to be holding her back. Uzumaki Naruto. Belatedly, he realized where they were. The strong desk beneath his arm should have been enough, but the new voice served as a particularly poignant reminder. He realized belatedly as the veil of slumber finally fell away. So that was why Madoka had been trying to rouse him so insistently. Seemed an apology was owed. Maya Yamada's innocent visage regarded him when he turned his gaze. Embarrassment colored his whiskered cheeks. SHD. Faint laughter from the class greeted him. I'm sorry for being so loud earlier, but we started out with the A's and now we've gotten all the way up to the U's. She stammered out, clasping her hands together against her bosom. Now that you're awake, would you mind introducing yourself? Pretty please. It was like staring at a tiny quivering mouse. He almost felt bad for her. Fine, twist my arm, why don't you? With a long-suffering sight, the blonde hauled himself upright. A jaw-popping yawn resonated through the classroom as he surveyed the room and his fellow students. Despite prior knowledge of what he would encounter here, he still found it strong to face, let alone believe, the sea of expectant female gazes staring back at him. Geez, he really was the only male here. Perhaps the only one on the island. Honestly, it exasperated him. Blasted is, and their rules. He'd taken that test on a lark to prove Tabane wrong. He hadn't expected he'd actually be able to more than one infinite Stratos. One didn't need keen hearing to catch the whispers. So that's him, the boy who can pilot and is. He doesn't look like much, does he? Isn't that supposed to be impossible? And why does he call it infinite tails? No, that's not it. I could have sworn that it was last Stardust Eek. Those voices dropped as a clenched fist slammed into his desk. OI. A glowing red orb reappeared over his shoulder. By all means, keep talking. If you hold no value on your dignity, you know. He hissed in a low voice that promised mayhem. Silence fell like a pall when he happily punched through. Well, all right, then. The whiskered youth began, stifling another yawn with the back of his hand. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. What I like and dislike ... Well, some of you already know that. Placid blue orbs swept across a few select individuals scattered across the room, alighting upon a girl with striking silver hair and another with dark hair bound back in a braid. The rest. I don't particularly feel like telling you. My hobbies? Yes, I've got a few. As to my dream, a devilish gleam shone in his eyes, I'll gladly tell you. You see, my dream. Cackling, he flung his arms back as if to embrace the world itself. ... is to become the HRM king. His bold statement, as if it were a fact, echoed in on itself into the class, drawing wide-eyed looks and baffled glances from many present. Those words, they were uttered with the utmost sincerity. No, perhaps it was that very sincerity which caused the uproar that followed. In a world where women had long since usurped men in both power and position, the sheer audacity of such a statement was unheard of, let alone from a man. Yet this stranger had made his intentions known to them all. He'd spoken without so much as a glimmer of hesitation, nay in challenge. It was akin to a declaration of war. Needless to say, absolute chaos ensued. Madoka flushed and palmed her face. Idiot brother, what nonsense is this? An accented voice rang out. Sure enough, his casual declaration drew criticism. From one individual above all the rest. Just who do you think you are? One could easily compare her appealing face, long, slender limbs, well-proportioned figure, and ample breasts to those of a model. Her light blonde hair formed strange drill-like curls at the ends. Clad in a modified uniform, she stood apart from the rest, the black frills of her skirt swaying as she bolted upright in her seat. Pale visage flushed, dark eyes wide with indignation, she moved a finger at the blonde. If he was at all offended by the breach of etiquette, the sleepy blonde did little to show it. Her fellow blonde tilted his head, regarding the newcomer as one would a harmless kitten. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Thought I already said that. And you are. Madoka knew that voice. That voice meant nothing but trouble, most of all for those on the receiving end of it. Times like these, she almost forgot. Naruto was very much the son of Tabane Shinanono. Adopted or not, he'd embraced his mother's unique brand of madness in a unique and singular way. His HRM king ideal was merely the tip of the iceberg. He was, in a word, absolutely insane. When it came to people, her siblings seemed to delight in leading them around by the nose. It wasn't that he was cruel, far from it, he simply enjoyed conversing with others. ... Even if it drove them stark raving mad. Knowing what was to come, she settled into wait. Momentarily taken back, Cecilia blinked owlishly at her brother. My name is Cecilia Alcott. She stammered out, and I will not tolerate such crass. Cecilia, that's a nice name. He interjected, patting her head before the girl's rant could pick up steam. Are you British? You are, aren't you? Do you have a problem with me? What problem might that be? Are you sure we can't discuss this in a civilized fashion? Too many questions. Stop, she wailed. Stop what? Stop patting my head this instant. So you admit you don't take issue with me, then? It was like watching one of those great tragedies. For all her struggles, Cecilia simply couldn't gain ground. Naruto's rapid-fire questions were like bullets, ruthlessly picked apart the wall of her resistance, dismantling her righteous tirade before it could truly gain traction. Even from this distance, Madoka could see the poor girl's head beginning to spin. Naruto had that effect on people. If you gave him a chance to talk, he'd have you chasing your own tail within a minute. That, or joining his side. But Cecilia had gone red in the face now, a sure sign that their argument was reaching its climax, and she wished to see what would happen next. Of course I have a problem with you, why you loud? Almost imperceptibly, Naruto's smile deepened. Oh, and what might that problem be? He was going to make her say it. Cecilia flushed deeply. That's. Oh, that's a pity. And here I thought we could be friends. Cecilia managed a coherent sputter. Madoka smiled thinly. Just like that, her brother swooped in for the kill. Rather than force her to speak and in doing so give the British girl a chance to turn the conversation in her favor, he took his hand from Cecilia's head and stepped past her without so much as a passing glance. In an instant she found herself dismissed, her arrogance dealt a fatal blow. An outraged squeak greeted this affront, and it took all Madoka had to contain her laughter. Already she could see the candidate's confidence crumbling like rotten timber. Anger rushed in to take its place, those pale hands ing into fists at her sides. Any moment now, she'd explode at him for this slight. All part of the plan. Wait, she shouted. Don't ignore me. Wait, I say. Naruto paid her no heed. There you are, Laura. Why yes, senpai. Quick as a flash, the silver-haired girl bolted upright out of her chair and nearly knocked down her desk in her haste to stand. She began to salute out of instinct, only narrowly remembering to catch herself in time before she made an utter fool of herself. That was the past. Her fingers bit down against her wrist. If the blonde found any fault with her actions, however, he did little to show it. The matching eyes of blue-crimson gazed down into hers for a fraction of a second, reflecting no emotion. None whatsoever. She braced herself for a scolding, or, barring that, stoic silence. She wasn't at all prepared for what followed. Hey, you don't think I'm allowed, do you? Certainly not when he took her hand. No, of course you aren't. Laura's mind turned to jelly. What is he doing? I'm not ready. My body isn't at all ready. Medic. In that moment, Cecilia's temper finally slipped its leash. Perhaps it was pettiness on her part. Perhaps it was his words and the sting they'd carried. Perhaps it had simply been the abrupt nature of his dismissal, how quickly he'd very disarmed her and shut her down like a petulant child. Whatever the case, she found she couldn't stomach the sight of that smug smile any longer. No, not for another instant. The very sight of this this brute inflamed her temper to a fever pitch. Her very body burned, seething with rage. How dare he embarrass her in front of everyone? This would not stand. She would have recompense. If he thought so highly of his skill then she'd just have to shatter it and assuage her honor in the process. Shrieking, she lashed out. You absolute beast. Rather, she attempted to. Instead, she found her wrist trapped firmly in his grasp. Unhand me, you filthy animal. I demand a duel. She expected anger, concern at least. His expression was neither. Blue eyes blazed red. Why, I thought you'd never ask. I like to fight. It's one of my few talents, you see. Excluding the whole only male to pilot in his sh dick. There's just something so freeing about throwing oneself headlong into battle and letting your fists do the talking. Yes, you could call it gratification. Words are all well and good, but at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. Perhaps it's the beast in me talking, some small part of Phantom Task's brainwashing that Tabane couldn't completely eradicate. Spirits know she tried. Who knows? When all is said and done, it comes down to one singular factor. I was taken from my home and altered. Because of that, I don't just enjoy fighting. I love fighting. Whatever instincts my kidnappers drummed into my body were impossible to forget. You can't just unlearn years of conditioning like that. You can teach a beast how to walk and talk like a human, even dress it up like one, but at the end of the day, he'll still be a beast. Still, suppose you could say it served me well enough over the years. After all, some of my closest allies were once my most bitter enemies before I got into it with them. Can you believe that? Maybe that makes me a bit of a battle junkie. Who knows? What did Tabane say? If at first you don't succeed, die again. No. Wait, pretty sure that's Dark Souls. Mom's got a fixation for 3 things. Cute, crazy, and all things sci-fi. It may have rubbed off on me. Or maybe that has something to do with my furry little friend. Oops, said that out loud, didn't I? Right, I'm rambling again. Where was I? Real men talk with their fists. Right, that's the one. Although she's a woman, so that doesn't make much sense. Still, it was my own longing for a fight that spawned the conflict between me and Cecilia as well as everything that followed. Now I know what you're thinking. Naruto, that doesn't make any sense. Yes, she was the one to speak up. She started it. True, but I had the chance to simply ignore her. Instead, I took her pride and shredded it to ribbons, forcing her to try and assuage her honor in a duel, and we all know how that sort of thing goes, don't we? Little did I know that battle would have far-reaching consequences. But it was worth it to wipe that smug smirk off her face. Battle junkie, remember. Oh, mein Gott, such language, Miss Bodwigo. Naruto hissed in quiet pain as Laura gave his armored shin a vicious kick and grabbed hold of his arm with reckless speed, hauling his face towards hers, firm fingers jerking the worn metal in the opposite direction to take his limb with it. His offered a dull note of protest at this backhanded treatment but otherwise remained silent. A stray ember of muted flame FLC curved between the greaves as it impatiently awaited its partner. Of course, said partner was very much distracted at the moment. He knew she hadn't spoken in anger and so let what followed wash over him like water off a duck's back. What were you thinking, picking a fight on your first day? Her accented voice rang out in the hangar, echoing in on itself. You were supposed to keep a low profile. Laughing, the blonde pulled himself free. Sorry, he hummed, flexing an armored limb. Not my style. What's taking so long down there, anyway? Are the thrusters broken? A string of angry German curses greeted him and he fought down a smile. There was just something so adorable about Laura when she was angry. In spite of that anger, she helped him don his piece by piece. For all her pride, all her ire only made her all the more attractive in his eyes. It made Naruto want to reach out and pinch those pale cheeks. Of course, that was a singularly bad idea considering his arms were currently sheathed in the menacing gauntlets of his own personal infinite Stratos. A pinch on his part might actually hurt Laura if he wasn't careful. Speaking of Laura, are you worried about me? It teased. I mean, I am not. Say, wanna hit up the training grounds after this? I've got an itch I need to scratch. You're such a battle junkie, brother. Madoka's irritated voice chimed in over his shoulder. She's right. It'll take more than that to change my mind, senpai. Laura added in sage agreement. Is that so? Yes. The matching eyes of red and gold regarded him with momentary interest before fell seeking back down to the readouts below. But she didn't rise to the bait. She was too stubborn for that. They both knew considerably more effort would be required on his part. The Silverette remained staunch in her anger, yet not so staunch that she couldn't be swayed. Naturally, Naruto was more than willing to oblige her. They knew one another far too well to expect anything less. Even so, she wasn't prepared for his abrupt fit of laughter. All right, then. With a sigh, he conceded defeat. Once this is over, we can just stay in and Laura's left ear twitched infinitesimally as he trailed off. And, nettle creaking, the whiskered warrior leaned forwards. His lips brushed the outer lobe of her ear, whispered ever so softly to her. Her eyes widened. Oh, stop. Madoka wailed. I can hear every word you're saying. Get your hands off him. As though waiting for that precise moment, Madoka popped up over Naruto's shoulder and slammed the helmet over his head, concealing his surreptitious visage from view. Wielding like her wrench like a mighty battle axe, she moved herself between the two of them and used her superior strength to push both pilots apart. Ruby eyes rounded on the blonde, glaring bloody red daggers at him. To his credit, the blonde didn't resist as his beloved little sister began jabbing him in the ch scent with it, every word emphasized by yet another poke. You are absolutely impossible. Why? Laura tilted her head. It's not like he said you couldn't join us. Naruto made a squelching sound. Madoka's eyes got really big. Before their eyes a slow flush crawled up the back of her neck, rushing like a rising scarlet tide to her cheeks. Within moments her entire visage burned red as a rose, when she frantically clamped both hands around to hide her wavering expression. If one looked close enough, you could even see steam rising from her covered face. When she dared speak, her palms didn't quite muffle the words that followed. WWW, what do you mean by that? I'm not interested in any of that stuff. Naruto and Laura exchanged a long look. She definitely is. Still, it's a shame, he muttered aside to himself suddenly, I thought Haoki would be here to see me off. Haoki. A beat of silence passed between the unlikely trio. What? We don't see her for years and now when we do see her she shuts down on me. Don't you find that strange? Laura and Madoka exchanged a glance. Do you really want the answer to that question? No, he relented with a sigh. Suppose I know the answer. I'll have to track her down later and have words with her. Rolling an armored shoulder, he turned back to the remnants of his. Right, then. We've got a duel to win. Let's not waste any more time, shall we? With that said, they set to work. Slowly, carefully, painstakingly. In the next span of the next hour the recently restored came together around Naruto. A living suit of armor, a peerless creation that wrapped him in arms forged of weathered metal and embers to wall him off from the world. In theory he'd be able to use the bracelet on arm to call upon it at will after Tabane's recent adjustments, but it was those very upgrades that concerned him in the first place. He'd be the first to admit his mother was one hen short of a hen house, but she could be absolutely brilliant when she wanted to be. Unfortunately, said brilliance often stemmed from her love of all things science fiction, chief among them her peerless love of video games. Of course, it stood to reason such a habit would rub off on her son as well. He wore now stood as a shining if somewhat faded example of this upbringing. Of course, the note carefully tucked away on his personage that came with it this morning certainly helped. Naruto, Suwu, I heard about your up-and-coming duel and rushed those upgrades on your main is. For you, no need to thank me. Soul should be able to change modes without overheating now. Go show that normie girl a thing or two. She'll probably underestimate you based on its appearance, but we both know better, don't we? Also, its second phase is really energy-intensive now. Might have made it a little too much like the original when I tinkered with it, so you better use it or lose it. Tell Haoki I said hi. All my love, Mama. It also stood in testament to a tried-and-true adage. Never judge a book by its cover. It was true that most wouldn't think his personal is little more than a dud. After all, Tabane had designed it with that very notion in mind. Most weren't prepared to fight a literal suit of burning armor capable of SWCH attack styles on the fly. Least of all something powered by his little Friend. Making short work of the last clasp, he bounced on the S of his feet, only finding himself slightly slowed by the suit itself. Of course, that would change once it began to warm up, growing progressively hotter with time. So, the helm warped his voice as he spoke, turning it to a low rumble. How do I look? Laura offered a dark grin. The fitting of a warrior and my husband, of course. The armored knight visibly shook with laughter. Again with that husband stuff. Alright ... that actually looks a little scary. Madoka relented, withdrawing half a pace. But how do you intend to beat Cecilia with ... that? Flipping the visor open with an armored hand, blue eyes twinkled out her, his mouth parting in a determined rictus of a smile. Right, I forgot this is your first time seeing me in this. Just watch. Kurama, finally woke me up, have you? Oh, shut up and let me have my fun, fuzz. No sooner had he uttered that name than an impossibly deep voice resonated within the suit and its body began to glow a deep crimson, as though lit from within. An ebony piece of metal detached itself from his back plate in a series of interlocking triangles to assume the shape of a tiny fox with twin protrusions jutting near its skull. Small enough to fit in the palm of his hand, it kept pace with the seemingly scorched helmet as it turned to regard them. Much to Madoka's consternation, the tiny device decided to land atop her head, nestling contentedly in her ebony tresses like a little chick. Bellying its petite frame, that same voice resonate from the drone. Not bad. On a scale of softness, I give you a 9. The red-eyed girl flailed spectacularly. Gah, what is this thing? Get off. You're too noisy. Darting away from her grasping hands, the apparatus zipped away towards its next victim. By contrast, Laura didn't protest when it settled itself in her hair, ears happily twitching. Ah, Laura, still 10 out of 10. The matching eyes fell seeked upward to meet him. Hello, Kurama. You look like you've seen better days. Of course I have. The drone whined. The brat never lets me out anymore. It's been months. Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this? Well, you'll be waiting a while yet. Naruto interjected. We're not out to terrify anyone this time. The little synthetic visibly drooped. Damn it, Kit. You never let me have any fun. There. Madoka sulked. Just what the hell is that thing? Naruto's helmeted head turned to regard her. That's Kurama. He helps me power this monstrosity. I wouldn't be able to make it move for long without him. In short, Laura adopting a lecturing tone as she rubbed her hand against the tiny creature. Kurama's a cutting-edge artificial intelligence designed by Tabane Shinanono to interface with an infinite Stratos. He's the first of his kind. Impressive? No. Madoka shot the preening drone a vicious glower. Not sure that's the word I'd use. I don't want to hear that from you, MDM fussy britches. Naruto didn't argue the point. It was pointless to say otherwise, if everyone else wanted to believe Kurama was little more than an AI. In spite of his attempts to convince them otherwise, then that was fine by him. He'd long since given up on the notion of convincing them about the near-limitless source of power trapped in his stomach. The truth ... well, he had no longing to explain that complicated mess. Who else but Tabane would believe that he housed a literal piece of a god, demon in the well of his soul? Least of all that said creature had taken a liking to him. Still, brother. Naruto arched an eyebrow. ... You're really going to use this against her, aren't you? Madoka posited. Isn't this overkill, considering she started this shindig? Hell, yeah. You literally have 8 others to choose. Well, last Stardust and Njolnir are ship busters at the very least. Doesn't feel right using them in a one-on-one duel. When neither contested him, he simply bowled on ahead heedless of their anger. Demon's Rage isn't ready, and neither is Silver Crow. I may have broken infinite tails. The rest are being fine-tuned by Tabane. Really, were luck I had soul on me at all or I would have been stuck with a shitty default model. Well, wish me luck. Hopefully I won't kill her by accident. Wish me luck, ladies. Wait, nah, Lalala, can't hear you. Before Madoka or Laura could think to protest further, he darted forward, swift steps carrying him out of the hangar and into daylight. Kurama shot after him without hesitation, neatly folding back into place between his shoulders as he breached the enclosure. Around him, his began to warm in response to Kurama's shared energy, readying itself for the coming battle, and his mind turned inward in preparation. Doubtlessly his opponent had already arrived and awaited him beyond. She struck him as the punctual type, one easily riled to anger. The notion brought a small smile to his face. She had no idea what was coming. With a thought, he ground to a halt in the arena. There she was. Sure enough, Cecilia and her blue tears awaited him in the skies above, having already claimed the DMNT aerial position for their duel. Good. He'd expected that much and would have been disappointed if she'd failed to meet said expectation. Her specialized in long-range combat after all. Of course she'd monopolized the high ground while she could. Again, the wayward blonde had both predicted this and taken it into account. Only a fool didn't research his opponent beforehand. The time afforded to him had been well spent in that regard. The blonde scowled. Her eyes narrowed upon him. What is the meaning of this? She called down at him inelegantly, raising her voice to be heard. Where is your you brute? Kurama chortled softly. It was a deep, throaty sound. Shall we begin? Yes, let's. Naruto exhaled softly, raising his right hand. You're looking at it. Sweetheart, I beg your pardon. Most infinite Stratos, by definition, didn't conceal their owner completely. At least some part of the pilot was exposed. In theory, this was how a traditional was constructed. Around the pilot, whatever remained exposed would be protected by the shields and, if worst came to worst, by the bulk of the frame itself. If too much damage was sustained, it would shut down and prevent any further injury of its pilot. A conservative design to be sure, but one accepted and perhaps derided by most pilots as a whole. Not so for Uzumaki Naruto. What do you call that thing? His helmeted head lifted to regard her. Soul of Cinder. In place of the unassuming blonde loomed a towering knight clad in badly worn and charred armor. Armor that had seen better days indeed. Faint embers of flame radiated from within its charred facade, smoldering inside the seemingly dirty breastplate as she looked on. Of his face she saw nothing beyond his startling blue eyes, for the rest of his whiskered visage now lay concealed behind a full helm. His full weight rested against a strange, coiled blade nearly the length of his own body. She could only assume the latter was part of his but this was absurd. Was this a joke? It seemed he donned a suit of rusted armor not a peerless machine capable of unquantified levels of destruction. She heard tell that he piloted more than one With this is ridiculous. A disbelieving laugh burst out of her all at once, sharp and mocking. That's your she guffawed, flinging a finger at him. You can't be serious. That rusted bucket of bolts thing doesn't even look like it can fly. Say what you will, the blonde's voice reverberated within the helm, warped by the metal. But I think I'll stay grounded for now. His response seemed to set something off in the girl, for when she replied her once cordial voice had turned frosty. I do hope you don't expect me to give you a handicap. Now it was his turn to laugh. Haven't you heard the old saying? He chastised her. Don't judge a book by its cover. Sweeping the coiled sword before him, he dropped into a pointed crouch. Last chance to back out, Blondie. Cecilia felt a cold chill run down her spine. Icy fingers of dread locked themselves around her throat, stifling the indignant retort she'd prepared. In disbelief she found herself hesitating, a seed of doubt taking root in her bosom as she stared down at her unassuming opponent. Something had changed. Instead of a ramshackle suit of armor, she found herself staring down a peerless engine of destruction, a juggernaut of unstoppable force about to come roaring from her head. A quiet tremor ran through her body. Even from this distance she could see something crimson leering out at her from within the visor's helm. Had his eyes always been red? She distinctly remembered otherwise. What was he? What are you doing? Focus. Mustering up her courage, she shook her head. As if I, Cecilia Alcott, would do such a thing. Puffing out her not insubstantial scent, the sharpshooter readied her rifle, took up a ready position of her own. Still, you can't possibly call that an It's a piece of junk. I'll finish of your shield energy if you even have any in a single shot. Distant laughter reached her from the ground. Judge me by my appearance, do you? Naruto's voice rose up at her, lilting with laughter. Wrong you would be. But you had your chance. Here I come. Wait, are you quoting EK? Cecilia's inquiry dissolved into gibberish as Naruto's suddenly dominated her vision, its blazing blade encompassing her entire field of sight. Face to face with Soul of Cinder and the strange stifling heat it emitted, her resolve momentarily quailed. Time slowed to a crawl as the larger reached the apex of its leap, momentarily blotting out the sun overhead. Cast in its shadow she could feel herself moving, but too slowly. Far too slow for her liking. As though she were trapped in quicksand, her body slowly shrank back from the imminent danger as she frantically brought her weapons to bear. Crunch! Breath burst from her lungs. Naruto rammed the hilt of his weapon into the shield just above her stomach. The sheer force of the impact ripped Cecilia from the sky and sent representative candidate spiraling towards the ground like a wounded bird. A harsh clamor from her came too late, warning her off the sudden dip of Blue Tear's defenses. Where had that come from? Righting herself with an effort, the battered blonde hastened to put some much-needed distance between herself and her opponent, only to watch him alight nimbly upon the ground once more. You can fly. She snarled down at him in disbelief. Hollow laughter echoed up to her. Nope. Jump good. A muscle jumped in her jaw. This wasn't happening to her. This couldn't be happening. A lowly commoner such as him couldn't possibly get the better of her. One could say it was a twisted way of thinking, but behind her confident exterior, her soul quivered at her sudden brush with defeat. She'd never fought someone who had gotten the better of her so swiftly. That he'd done so in only a matter of moments rattled her. No, she refused to accept this. To lose to someone who made such a mockery of everything, who never took anything seriously. It galled her. Was this it? Had she come so far, only to lose someone like this? She had to be strong. For her sake. For her family name. If she lost, her name meant nothing. Her honor, even less. Then why was she being overpowered? In desperation, she grasped at straws. Yes, that was it. It was just a fluke. That must be it. Nothing more, nothing less. All right, calm down. Just calm down, Cecilia. Use your drones to him, keep him at range. She wasn't prepared for the sudden torrent of light that rushed up at her from below and as such found herself scrambling once more. In her haste to evade the sudden long-range offense, she failed to realize she'd lost track of her opponent. Had she paid more attention, she might have seen him tap his sword against the ground and loose a series of burning bolts from its hilt. As it stood, she found herself too preoccupied by the unexpected deluge from what should have been a close combat to reorient herself in time. Gotcha. With a startled shriek, she snapped off a shot when he lunged at her again. To no avail. The bolt of blue plasma caromed harmlessly of Cinder's hide as Naruto drove it at her. Ignoring her feeble offense, the burning is roared past her like a flaming arrow, searing through her twin cannons in a vicious crosscut. In dismay, she watched the ruined pieces crumble away and was again just a hair too slow. A gauntlet crashed through her shields and closed around her head, flinging her to the ground. This time, Cecilia failed to right herself in time, her nerve failing her as the burning night descended upon her with a wordless roar. Deprived of her defenses, her long-range superiority, she didn't realize her peril until it was too late. Flailing, she launched her drones, only to watch them vanish in a cone of flame. Something broke in her when faced with that haunting visage. No, no, no. What are you doing? Move. Before, belatedly, she realized her mistake. She'd let him close the gap. I've blundered. A running clockwise sweep put Naruto's entire body into a vicious rotation and hammered her down with the overwhelming weight of his blade. Somehow, she managed to catch herself with her free hand and knees. Even as she tried to draw a bead on him, he cut apart her rifle in her hands and followed through with an overhead smash that left her ears ringing, punctuated by a left-to-right downward swing. Like a relentless storm striking against the shore, Cinder proved just as relentless. It cared nothing for her pride, nor the tears in her. With relentless savagery, it tore her hopes apart, piece by painful piece. Blow after blow rained down on her shields to strike at the sundered metal of her until at last, earth buckled beneath her feet and Cecilia crumpled to her knees. Even then, it seemed Naruto's soul of Cinder would sooner beat her into the ground than cease attacking. Her pride buckling, Cecilia frantically seized up a means of escape from the blade's assault. Stop, stop, stop. Pleading, she flung up her hands. I give up. I surrender. Just stop. A beat of awkward silence passed between the two of them. Crimson orbs glowered at her with wordless intent. She wasn't prepared for what followed. An armored hand descended, and patted her head. All right, good girl. Cecilia blinked, huh. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.